Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome officially to the channel. This is, as you know from the intro, a series where I go into odd game accessories or peripherals that developers made to get us more into the game mentally or physically. Today, I actually have something that was, well, kind of a thing in the 80s and 90s, and that's portable TVs. More aptly, TV tuners that you could plug into a handheld. The most notable of which worked with the Game Gear, but there was also one that worked with the Game Boy Advance, and one that worked with the TurboGrafx Express. So if you have a moment, sit back and hang out a while as we talk about the portable TV and how they worked on the Game Gear, Game Boy Advance, and TurboGrafx Express. I know it seems odd by today's standards of smartphones to think about carrying anything but that around for entertainment, especially streaming and TV, but these devices weren't always around. In the earlier days of TV, around the 1970s, people had figured out how to shrink the TV down from something the size of a very large piece of furniture to something that could fit in your pocket. Now, that's fairly impressive for something that didn't get super popular till right around the 1950s. These were commonly analog devices that used an antenna to grab radio signals over the airwaves and produce a picture. Reception on this would be, well, spotty depending on where you were and how good your antenna was. And there was no shortage of either of these all the way from the 1970s through the 1980s and into the 1990s. They only seemed to get more advanced, though they stayed relatively expensive. However, they were so popular, in fact, that both Sega and Nintendo, along with TurboGrafx, stood up and took notice of them. The first one of these I want to take a look at is the Game Gear version. Now, this was a small tuner light device that you would plug into the Game Gear slot on the back of the console itself. It was a rather small tuner that allowed you to adjust the dial on the top to try to find a TV frequency, much like how old-style radios would work around that time. Now, the antenna on this could actually be extended and angled to get a reception on the device itself. However, this device didn't come without some drawbacks. Reportedly, this unit drained the battery life of the Game Gear significantly faster than just playing Game Gear games, and honestly, that's pretty impressive given the fact that the Game Gear would take like 6 AA batteries and had an average battery lifespan of about 4 hours. Most of us that had one of these in a day got very used to having one of these pill-shaped battery packs plugged into our Game Gear so that we could use it for any significant period of time, or we just plugged it into the wall outlet through that same device so that the system wouldn't fall on its face pretty much randomly. Now, I can only imagine how bad it would be with the TV tuner basically out in the open. On top of this, the downside, it also didn't have very good reception. With the unit usually mostly just getting static most of the time, but given it was a $50 attachment for a handheld console as a trade-off that most people would be okay with spending around $150 for a dedicated unit, it pretty much wasn't bad for something to play games and play TV. Now, Nintendo also wanted in on this, making a much larger unit for their popular Game Boy Advance handheld system. This was also plugged into the cartridge slot and worked much the same way, but it was way bigger. I'm unsure if this made it any more reliable of a unit or not, but it seemed to be more expensive, coming in around $90. However, it did run off its own 4 AAA batteries and gave you a total of 6 hours of usage with it. Interestingly enough, this could even work with the early DS models, given that they had a Game Boy Advance card slot in them. Similarly, the Turbo Express also had one of these that was right around $100 as well, and plugged into the card slot very similarly to the other two. These days, this add-on on any handheld game system you got won't even work in the United States. The reason being that in 2009, all analog carriers of television were shut down and converted to digital only, as there's pretty much nothing being transmitted for these devices to pick up on as a result. However, what do you guys think of this one? Did any of you ever have one of these, and how much did you use it? How was the battery life? Let me know in the comments. While you're there, if you could do me one more favor, please leave this video a like. And if you haven't, consider subscribing. It really does help me out a lot. For now though, thank you once again for watching, and until next time, happy gaming.